cut to my camera. I hope that you can see me okay and hear me okay. There is a comments section below the video if you're at leveragewp.co. If you have any ideas or questions or anything that's not exactly clear, please use that comments form to go ahead and let me know and let everyone know. I'll reply there, and I'll also incorporate all that information into the subsequent classes that are going to be delivered this week. Today is Sunday here in beautiful, sunny Colorado. I live up in the mountains at about 10,000 feet in elevation in the thin air here near the ski areas in Colorado. And it's exactly noon. And so it's 11 a.m. in California, 2 p.m. on the East Coast in the United States. I do know that it's 6 p.m. in London, and I just found out because I had some questions about the class times. There's a few students in New Zealand joining us. Welcome. It's the future there. It's Monday morning at 7 a.m. in New Zealand. So I really appreciate you being here. This event will be recorded, and so please feel free to sit back. I would encourage you to take notes, and but you will be able to go back and watch the replay. I know there's some people at different places in the world that it's the middle of the night. So if you can't be here, and if you're not here right now, don't worry about it. Thanks for watching the replay if that's what you're watching right now. But let me introduce myself. I'm Gregg Davis, and I've been working with WordPress since about 2006. But if we go back even further, I moved out to Colorado in 1992, straight out of college. I was an art major in English I studied, and I came out to experience the mountains and to go snowboarding, honestly. I moved to Breckenridge, which is about a half hour from where I'm living right now, over the Continental Divide. And I became a snowboard instructor in 1992. And I've since retired from that using the techniques that I'm going to teach in this class, to be honest. I was able to retire after a 25-year career as a snowboard instructor and a trainer and an examiner for other instructors. And I've got my lifetime season pass for me and my family. And so it's really exciting to be able to just go skiing and snowboarding for free anytime I want at any of the Vail resorts. Breckenridge Ski Resort, as I said, is about a half hour away. So, you know, I talked about finding WordPress in about 2006. However, I did end up making a business back in 1996, making websites for clients. My first client was a landscape company in Breckenridge, Colorado, and my roommate and I started figuring out how to host and create websites without programming them from scratch, using Adobe Go Live, which turned into Adobe Dreamweaver. And Flash we used to use. But you know, I'm really a proponent of learning how to create and manage websites without having to code them from scratch. And that's the beauty of WordPress. I found WordPress in the early 2000s, and, you know, it was a blogging software to begin with, but the fact that it's open source software allows us to leverage that software, and it's legal to do anything that we want with it. You know, it's open source means that, you know, it's created and supported by a community of people, and it's basically donated to the world. You can take the WordPress software and you can make a fork of it. You can take it and do anything you want with it. Use it in a commercial project, a personal project. You can sell the things that you make with WordPress. You could even sell a piece of software that you created with WordPress as a basis for it. And so open source is really quite amazing, because we're able to leverage the work of thousands and tens of thousands of other people who have contributed to the software project. And to this day, WordPress is an open source project. It's a wonderful piece of software, as you guys probably know. You know, one of the things that I just wanted to go over, you know, today, some of the benefits of working with WordPress, and especially with making websites for clients, is that I can work from anywhere. I could work from my RV as long as I have a cell signal to get online or a Wi-Fi signal. I can manage my business and do it from wherever I want. Right now, I'm in my little house at 10,000 feet in Fairplay, Colorado. And, there's, I don't have to sit around and work and make websites one by one either. One of the things and one of the beauties with creating websites and managing people's business resources is that there's not only an opportunity for instant income, for charging a good amount for design fees and for your time and for building an object like a website, but there is recurring income and recurring revenue built in to being able to make and then maintain websites for customers. And so not only that, and I know that, I started to make websites for clients in 1996 and found that if I bought my hosting package in bulk, then I could break it into little pieces and I could rent the space just like I had a physical storage unit or something where I was renting, storage space to people, and they would pay me month after month after month and year after year. And as long as I kept the air conditioning working, the heat working in the wintertime, the door locks and the gate code active, then I could receive that monthly income from many, many, many clients over and over without much extra work. And that's the beauty of leveraging something like WordPress and the website design systems that we have at our disposal. Today, I just want to let you guys know that whether you're planning on or whether you do make websites for clients, or whether you want to leverage WordPress for your own business, your own projects, your own business ideas. Maybe you're building a community around a niche alongside of a YouTube channel or something like that. All the techniques that I teach that relate to building and hosting and managing WordPress websites for clients also apply if you wanted to use this information to support your own business. And so I'll give you a little bit of my story. I already have the, when I moved to Colorado in 1992, I was a big skateboarder growing up. And I loved snowboarding back when it was very, very new. I grew up on the East Coast in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And, at the time, being a skateboarder in the 80s, it was awesome. But in Pennsylvania, it snowed in the wintertime and all of our ramps would get covered in snow. The driveway, would not be skatable. And so we started to slide down the hill on our skateboard decks with the wheels taken off, and so I like to say that I invented snowboarding, back in the 80s, right? When other people like Tom Sims and Jake Burton were really inventing snowboarding and creating real snowboards with waxable bases and metal edges, just like skis, and trying to sell those, back in the late 70s to 80s. My friends and I also invented snowboarding. However, in the back of Thrasher magazine or the skateboard magazines, we started to see that there were pictures of people snowboarding, which was so awesome. So that's what brought me out to Colorado after college. And, when you're a snowboard instructor, or, you work on the mountain at all, you've got to do something in the summertime. You basically get fired in a seasonal job every spring. You've got to wait it out in the summertime. And so I did a number of different things. I worked at a sign shop, which I managed for many years. And a lot of people work in landscaping or construction, seasonal jobs that only work in the summer months, often in the mountains here. And I started to look at, the internet was pretty new, and being a designer and an artist, I was a visual artist, a sculptor, and I used to do pen and ink drawings, with very fine mechanical pens and pencils. I started to be really enamored with the internet. You could put a piece of artwork up on the internet, even if it was made of ones and zeros, of HTML and CSS code. You could put something up on the internet called a website, And it could have pictures, it could have text, and it could have colors, backgrounds, designs, and that would be instantly globally available. I found that quite amazing. And of course, as you know, during the 90s, that was the birth of the real internet, where we know about it today, where, if you're a business at that time, it started to be true. You really needed to have a website if you wanted to be taken seriously in business, especially as we got into the 2000s and later. And so, like I said, my friend Jeff, my roommate at the time, who was also a snowboard instructor, and we started to make websites in the summertime. And we started a business called siteassist.net, and started to sell hosting and website design for clients. But through my snowboard career, one of the things that I've kept doing and really developed as a skill set in my life has been teaching and sharing things that I love with other people. As I mentioned, a snowboard instructor, right? When I got my group or my private lesson people, and we started walking over to the bunny hill, to start strapping on our snowboards, I was always having a blast. I did a really good job, I thought. And, I worked my way up through the rankings and became not only an instructor, but a trainer of instructors. And then I applied and became an examiner, where I would give the instructors their trainings towards their instructor certifications. And then I would examine them and give them their certifications if they passed, and was an examiner in my region here in the Rocky Mountains. And you may not be aware, there's also a national team of instructors. Our organization is called the American Association of Snowboard Instructors, and it's part of the Ski Association as well, Professional Ski Instructors of America. And I tried out for the national team in 2000. Every 4 years, there's a new national team selected, and those are the people that write the instructor manuals and invent new ways of teaching people how to learn these snow sports, skiing and snowboarding. So I made the national team in 2000, started to work on a national level, traveling around all over the United States, teaching instructors how to teach better and how to teach more safely. And we came up with all the written materials, the manuals like this. So I just wanted to show you, this is the Park and Pipe instructor's guide that I had a hand in helping to develop and write. If you look there in the yellow, that's me on my snowboard in the yellow. And I helped to create the freestyle accreditation program for the American Association of Snowboard Instructors. Freestyle being jumping up in the air and riding the half pipe, just like I loved to do on a skateboard. When I was a kid riding pools and ramps in Pennsylvania, I got to start to do things like this. That's me in the air in the yellow jacket, airing over my friend Sean's head in the half pipe at Vail, Colorado during this photo shoot for the Park and Pipe manual. But in any case, one thing I love to do is teach people. So I'm super excited to welcome all of you into the fold. You may be aware that, and you may have taken my Udemy course. More than 74,000 people have taken my WordPress business course on Udemy, how to build a WordPress design business for clients. And I really feel that I've taken my skills I developed over 25 years in snowboarding and brought that to really what I know and love as far as web design. And so, what I'm going to be teaching you today and on Tuesday and on Thursday this week in the Leverage WordPress Masterclass is how you can take basic skills that you can develop easily, leverage free pieces of software as well as inexpensive premium pieces of software, and arrange all the technical things together into a few different things. One, products that are standalone products like websites that you can sell for a flat fee. Websites these days, WordPress website, very basic one, should be sold, at least in the United States, from probably $3,000 to $5,000 as a basic lowest cost for a website. But then websites do need to be maintained, right? And so there's design fees, there's hosting, and I teach my students and I host my clients' websites. So I like to host my clients' websites because hosting has a wide variety of reliability, cost, services, and the number of resources that are available depending on the hosting plans. And so one of the things that we're going to be covering in detail this week are different types of hosting for WordPress websites, what they cost, whether those costs are warranted, and what are really the three types of hosting that you might use and when you should use each in those situations. And so along with hosting, WordPress websites, all websites really, apps on your phone, all technology based on code needs to be updated periodically, right? So, you have, you've got your iPhone, you may have, you have apps on your phone that need updating periodically. And in fact, if you don't update apps on your phone, oftentimes you, first of all, miss out on new features, but then the app may stop working at some point. And it's the same with WordPress websites. And so, website care plans are something that really I was lucky enough to think, hey, Jeff, back in 1996, if we sell the hosting to our website clients, not only can we charge them a few $1,000s for a website, but at the same time, we can charge them a nominal fee and really spend not that much time updating the websites. And then that client can just set it and forget it. They don't have to go in there and try to figure out if anything is any reason for anything having been broken or why their website is slow. Those are the things that I've learned over the years to figure out so that clients can just go ahead and send me an email, send me a quick text if they need anything. And I have monitoring systems that I set up so that I know instantly if a client site that I'm hosting is either down or slow. And all of my clients are super happy. And I've often taken over websites for other clients, new clients I get. Over time, almost half of my clients have come to me because their website designer was gone, disappeared. They can't get a hold of them, or they were unable to support any changes that they needed in their website or things like that. But what I do is I sell websites for a flat fee. And then I insist that my clients host their websites with me, and I provide hosting and website care on an ongoing basis. And so let me share my screen here quickly. And so I'd just like to show you my screenshot of my Stripe account here. I've blacked out the email addresses of the customers here, but here you can see some of my recurring revenue charges. These are either annual or monthly revenue charges. And by setting up websites with hosting and website care available and monitoring and updates and everything, I'm able to bolster my income. I don't only make websites for flat fee per project, but also receive monthly and annual recurring revenue from my client sites, as you can see here. So let me share with you a bit about hosting. I host my sites with 3 different kinds of hosting that I'll share with you today. And we'll talk about when and why to use each of these types of hosting. This is my GridPane account where I do most of my high-end hosting. And as far as shared hosting, this is the most basic and the least expensive kind of hosting where I would recommend that you start out if you're just starting out or you only have very few sites. And then there's managed WordPress hosting. This is an example called Flywheel, which I really do love, and this is the one that will really take care of everything for you in the background. Although it costs a little bit more, you really don't have to configure anything at all, and it's a really beautiful interface and easy to use. Now, if we go back to grid pane here, you can see across the top there are a few different server providers. You can see DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, Amazon Lightsail, and UpCloud, or any other custom VPS or virtual private server that you would like to hook up to your GridPane account. GridPane and other self-managed hosting for WordPress programs are services that provide a layer, kind of a control panel on top, a custom software stack that makes WordPress as fast as it can possibly be, and it's probably the highest end and most robust type of WordPress hosting available now. You still don't need much knowledge about servers, server administration, and that sort of thing, because they do provide service support, and they have all these setups within the control panel. So you can easily set up private servers for each of your groups of clients. And in the long run, if you're hosting multiple websites, it's probably the most economical way to go. Self-managed hosting like this also gives you the most transparency and control about what resources you're allocating for each of your servers and how many sites you want to put on each server, and you can monitor those resources and really know exactly what's going on. And so it's the least expensive as far as per site when you're hosting multiple sites. I'm going to be providing a lot of notes for the 3 classes that we're going to have this week. There are going to be replays. I'm recording this in the background. And so all of the different companies and links to those companies I'll provide in a series of notes where I'll give you some of the screenshots, notes that I take on my iPad and create on my iPad, as well as links and things like that. And so this being one of 3 classes this week, let me just outline about hosting programs and the differences. As far as shared hosting goes, it's basically having a server, right? Server is out on the internet holding websites on a physical computer that is in a data center, air conditioned and ventilated and everything. And so if that website is sitting on a server right there, then a person might be on their own computer wanting to open a website. And so when they do that, their browser goes out with their internet connection and it goes to find that website at a domain name. And you either click through to that domain name on a Google search or by typing it in, but that website is connected by a very fat tube to the internet. It's a high-speed connection, and so when the person either types in the address or clicks on a link that goes to an address, for example, maybe WordPress.org, then the browser goes out and it says, okay, at WordPress.org, let's look that up. It's as if you were, at a library going to the card catalog or something, and it goes to the DNS system of the internet, which is domain name system. And that domain name system is basically a directory that connects actual domain names that are human readable, like WordPress.org, and it lists the IP address associated with that domain name. It is a method for looking up websites with human readable names. And so an IP address is 4 numbers separated by dots or periods like this. And so the DNS looks up that IP address, and the IP then goes to a web server, right? It goes and says, okay, that human readable web address is available at this web server. This web server hosts the website. It's got air conditioning, electricity. It's got a really fast connection to the internet. But then over here where that person types in the WordPress.org website, the server needs to take that website, translate it to an IP address, and then that IP address defines a location on the internet where that website is physically hosted. And so if I move down here a little bit, here's the person with their computer and browser, and they want to open a website. And I've just made this server much larger because I'm talking about shared hosting. And so if this is a shared server, what I mean by that is that a shared server doesn't host just one website. It hosts many websites. In this case, in this diagram, here's 9 websites that are on this shared server. And this one right over here, that might be WordPress.org. And so the server is like, okay, that IP address holds this web address. WordPress.org is the one we need to deliver to the user. And that makes the user happy. Great. They were able to get their website and their website only from the shared server. So that IP address, as defined by the DNS system, allows that server to just deliver that single website to the user. So imagine a different site. Maybe not google.com. It's probably not hosted at a shared server, but maybe greggdavis.com is also hosted at this server. That's at the same IP address, but the shared server knows, oh, this is the right website associated with that IP for greggdavis.com. And in that case, it's able to just deliver that website at the same IP address over to this person without confusing the person or sending the wrong website. And so that's really how shared hosting works. Each of the websites on the shared server are sharing a lot of resources. They're sharing the memory and the storage space. They're sharing resources as far as how many people can visit that website concurrently without taxing it too much. And they even share an IP address, but the server itself divides them up and sends them to the right person. And so here's a site that is hosted at shared hosting, clcsummit.org. That's one of my clients. And I have a Chrome browser extension from DNSlytics that lets you look at the IP address and some information publicly available about the IP of a particular website. If you scroll down on this website itself, you can see that under hosting, it says number of domains hosting 24, and there's a number of domains there that are other clients of mine hosted in a shared environment. And so that's where you can see that they're sharing resources at a particular IP address, which means they're sharing a server. And so let's talk about some of the issues that occur with shared hosting or can occur. First of all, the noisy neighbor problem. This means that when you have other people sharing the same resources, if one of the sites on a particular shared server starts using an excessive number of resources, like maybe you had a Reddit post go viral and it's bringing tons of traffic to your website, you can start using an excessive amount of resources, and you can affect the speed, the loading speed, and the ability for the other sites to perform at their optimal speed. And at the extreme levels, some of the sites on the server could actually go down if they're not able to get the resources that they need. Their sites might open slower for their visitors just because some noisy neighbor is having some traffic excessiveness. And so the second problem that can happen is that it's a budget service. And so you really don't get as many resources as you do at other servers. And because of that, people are budget minded. And so the shared server companies are motivated to keep you locked in. They'll include domain names for free. They'll include email services, like they'll host your email at the same server as your website. And that keeps you locked in because it's a pain to move away when you have multiple services being provided by one provider. Now, these shared hosts also offer a control panel that's pretty standard called cPanel. It provides website hosting, but in cPanel, you can also achieve email hosting. And email send and receive hosting is something that it's a best practice to keep away from your website host. And there's a third best practice regarding email, and that's sending email from WordPress called transactional email, where if somebody fills out a form, they can get an email sent directly from the website to them. And so with the website hosting, there's, the problem with a lot of people. It's a best practice not to host your email at the same server where your website is hosted. And it's also a best practice. When I was hosting WordPress websites, 15, 20 years ago, there was a time when all of my clients' websites were hosted at a shared server, a hosting company, great hosting company, Media Temple. But there's something where I really needed to be in there managing my systems a little bit better, because what happened was that, one day I woke up and all of my client websites were down. And of course, I started getting phone calls. And looking at it, what happened was that one of the websites on my shared server had its email box was full. And by default, cPanel gives you 250 megabytes as kind of a default mailbox size. You could set that in cPanel, and you can change the maximum allocation of gigabytes or megabytes. But 250 megabytes isn't very big. So, it was months and months later, but my client hadn't been deleting emails out of their email box on their computer. But once that email box filled up, there were problems. The resources that were needed, because that email box was full, the shared server was now unable to service the websites. And so the websites started having problems. All I needed to do was empty out, or change the allocation and make that email box bigger. So really, you want to avoid having any dependency for your email systems, both send and receive email and transactional or outgoing email from the WordPress website on your web server itself. In that way, there won't be any resource conflict as far as email services and the visitors to your website getting slowed down or having the website go down at all. So when we talk about outgoing email, there's send and receive email, which is really hosted email at a server somewhere. And then outgoing email directly from your website is called transactional or just outgoing email. It's outgoing only. And that kind of email doesn't need to be hosted. It occurs when you have a web form, you might have a contact form, or any kind of interaction on the website where a notification email might go out. It might be a contact form or a survey form. Something like that generates an email that goes out. And there are plugins for WordPress that allow you to do this. And you should set up a dedicated SMTP system or a transactional outgoing email system to accomplish this using best practices. The checkout process involved in an e-commerce site does that very same thing. When you check out and complete a transaction, an email gets sent out to the person that made the purchase, and that is a transactional email. It's an outgoing only email, and so you're probably very familiar with addresses like no reply at thedomain.com, something like that, where it's just an outgoing email and you can't use it as a back and forth email address. And that's also called SMTP email, and there are SMTP plugins that you can set up and use third-party services to be able to make your outgoing email for your website have the highest deliverability rate and the least chance of ending up in the spam box. And so by default, WordPress comes with a convenient outgoing email system that is working out of the box, and it's using the language that WordPress is built with called PHP, and that system is called the PHP sendmail function. It's controlled by PHP, And that's kind of similar to hosting your email right with your website. This is not something that you want to leave when you set up your website. If somebody goes to your website and they might fill out a contact form or something like that, PHP by default will power the outgoing emails that get sent out from that contact form, either to the owner of the website and the person that filled out the contact form. And so on a shared server, that system is actually set up by default. And when WordPress is installed, there's usually a working PHP sendmail system that is there. However, you don't really want to use the PHP sendmail system for your transactional email system. It's better to use an SMTP plugin and a third-party service. It's not to say that shared hosting is bad. It's a great place to start, and you just need to know how to do a few different customizations to make sure that your email systems don't conflict with your website hosting and steal resources from your website itself. And it's not that hard, even with a simple, inexpensive shared host, to set up both send and receive email that's hosted using a third-party provider, and also transactional email that is not using PHP sendmail, but is using an SMTP plugin and a third-party service. And so if you look at a managed website host like Flywheel, Flywheel doesn't even allow for email services. If we look at what managed hosting is, we can compare the pricing a little bit between managed hosting and shared hosting. Now, SiteGround here talks about these services as managed WordPress hosting. They're really just talking about having a custom control panel instead of cPanel on top of their website shared hosting programs. But I recommend the Grow Big and the Go Geek shared hosting programs. They're excellent programs to start with, very inexpensive. And these two allow for more than one website, not just the single website that the startup plan gives you. And when you look at the discount amount, SiteGround, basically, this Grow Big would cost $24.99 a month, but you can buy up to 3 years in advance at 73% off. So $7 a month, or a little over $10 or $11 a month for up to 3 years. Will give you a great discount and a great start, but then after that discount period, it goes back to a kind of normal hosting charge for unlimited websites, $25 a month or $40 a month. And you could certainly stay with that, but it's not that hard to migrate your websites to a more robust host after you've gotten started and gotten multiple websites and clients paying you for the hosting. Now, if we look at Flywheel as an example of managed WordPress hosting, they really take care of a lot of the things that you might need to configure in shared hosting and in self-managed hosting in the background for you. And so if we look at the pricing page here, you can see that the tiny plan is only $13 a month. Billed at $150 a year. It includes 2 months free. That's their discount program. But it's only for one WordPress site. And then there's a starter plan at $300 a year for, again, one WordPress site. But if you go up to the freelance plan, it allows for 10 WordPress websites. And so there you're paying only $10 per month per site. And it's a really great solution to allow Flywheel to take care of everything in the background, including database management, and resource allocation. You know that you're not sharing your space with any other websites at all, and they don't even allow you to have email hosted or transactional email, using PHP at all, as I mentioned. And so you don't want to use PHP SendMail for sending your outgoing email from your WordPress website. As far as email hosting goes, and that's for regular, send and receive email at your domain name. It's basically, from about $2.50 US to $5 US per month. That's per email address. And so, I just roll that into my website care and hosting plans. I don't particularly charge the client for that, but it includes 25 gigabytes of storage for email, and it allows you to have email addresses at your business domain name. And it also, as I've mentioned, as a best practice, it prevents the website from using resources that the website, it prevents email from using resources that the website needs to use. So by providing, email at your custom domain name, it's much more professional than using, say, a Gmail address or something like that for your business. And it provides better deliverability because you can use, your domain name has a reputation, and you can control the fact that people are expecting email from that domain name. And PHP SendMail, included in shared hosting, is it doesn't have deliverability protections against spam. It's just using the same exact IP address as your shared host. And so using a service for your business email that has a protected and an IP address that has deliverability in mind is a best practice. Now, two places that I'd really recommend for hosted email: Google Workspace, used to be G Suite, or Google for Business, used to be called. And I use Rackspace for hosted email. Google is $5 a month per email address, and Rackspace's email service is about $2.50 per month, up to $2.99, I think, per email address per month. But what that allows you to do is have addresses like this: your name at yourbusinessname.com. Very professional, and at the same time using a protected IP address that has reputation management built in, where those companies that are providing that service, Google and Rackspace, etc., are protecting those IP addresses, and they're not associated with your website IP. And so, if you have, say, redpopsicle.com, that's your business name, you could have, Gregg at redpopsicle.com as an email address. And so potentially, somebody's just starting out with their business might go grab the email address from Gmail, redpopsicle at gmail.com. And you can see that that's just not quite as professional. So when you get email addresses at your domain name, it's much more professional as a business owner, and you can have addresses like info at redpopsicle.com or customer service at redpopsicle.com instead of addresses like, redpopsicle at gmail.com, which is more of a beginner way to go about it. It's a little bit easier to set up, but it's much less professional. So as far as the benefits of managed WordPress hosting, companies like Flywheel, Kinsta, WP Engine, they are setting up private servers, virtual private servers, so that you're not sharing resources. They allocate the resources. They take care of, easy to set up WordPress, and they're guaranteed to be very, very fast. But if we look at gridpane.com, Gridpane is really my favorite host of all hosts. They've been around since 2018. Patrick there in the corner, great guy. They're very great, honest, transparent, ethical company. But what they're providing is really appropriate more for agencies or people who are going to be hosting multiple websites. Basically, their byline is we help serious WordPress agencies crush their hosting problems. You could see that the cost of this is $200 a month, and that actually doesn't include the servers. You can see that these servers are ones I have up my account, DigitalOcean, Vultr, etc. You provision a server for each of your groups of websites, or even as single websites. And like I mentioned, SiteGround calls this managed hosting, but really it's just shared hosting, and they have their own custom control panel. So sometimes that word managed is a little bit misused. In the industry, managed is really company that's going to set up your servers for you and not be shared. Not that shared is bad. Like I said, it's a great place to start. But if we go back over to GridPane, if we look at, say, DigitalOcean is an infrastructure provider. They provide, raw servers, as do all these other companies. And you can set up even a custom virtual private server or custom VPS with any company that you want to. But there's easy setup at some of these. So I've just clicked DigitalOcean, and if you look, I'm going to click here at the server plans. You can see that there's all these different levels, and you can see the pricing from, say, $5 up to $24, $48, and they've got levels of disk storage. Cores is number of CPUs, and how many gigabytes of RAM memory. And so it takes a little bit of research to know, but this is something that I'll be covering in more detail in the future. But basically, I'll generally go and use at least a 2 gigabyte RAM server. But generally, I'll just go get, like a $20 server, and I can fit, GridPane can consult with you about this, because, not only are they a control panel that sits in front of your website servers, but then you get to be completely transparent about what resources you have. You can monitor them, and you can put multiple websites on whatever servers that you have. So say on a 2 gigabyte RAM, $18 a month server, it's generally recommended that you have somewhere from maybe 20 to 40 WordPress websites on one of those servers at $18 a month. And so you can go to a company like DigitalOcean and you can set up your WordPress website manually on your server and everything. But one of the things that these self-managed WordPress hosting companies do is that they provide you with not only a control panel in front to control the setup WordPress websites automatically, but they also have a proprietary software stack that makes WordPress sites run as fast as possible. So, pricing wise, if you're going to have maybe 10 sites or less, I might recommend going with a managed host because of the pricing structure. We saw that GridPane starts out at $200 a month. With Flywheel, at that freelancer plan, it's $100 a month for 10 sites. Of course, if you want to get 20 sites, then you're at $200 a month. If you need 40 sites, you're at $400 a month. 80 sites, you can see where it's going here. But if you look at something like GridPane, you do have an initial fee for the software stack, the control panel, and excellent support from really educated and really friendly developers that know WordPress super well and can help you. So, like I said, you get a 2 gigabyte of RAM server then that you do have to pay for separately for, say, $18 a month. But then, you can put, say, up to 40 basic WordPress websites on that $18 a month server. And so you could see that where this becomes more affordable is if you go to higher numbers of sites. I'll often, instead of 40, just to make sure that all of my sites perform at their best, I'll maybe limit them to 20 sites per 2 gigabytes of RAM. And so I'll get one 2 gig and put 20 sites on it for $218 a month. And so that's about the same cost as Flywheel, but I do have more control and more transparency over what I'm actually getting and the resources that I'm using. But then if I want to put another 20 sites on another $18 server, you can see that at this scale, it starts to become a lot more affordable per site. So for, what is that? $236 a month, I'm at 40 sites. Instead of $400 a month over at Flywheel. So it makes a big difference at scale. If you're going to be hosting client sites or a lot of your own sites, I definitely recommend going with self-managed hosting so that you can control the servers that you use, the resources that you're allocating. And there are a whole lot more that I'll talk about in the next couple of classes, a whole lot more benefits to using a service like GridPane, where you have, one-click staging, migration of your sites, in between different servers. You can clone sites and you can clone entire servers. But as far as the sites where you can fit, say, 40 sites onto a 2 or a 4 gig server, those are basic websites. But let's talk about WooCommerce and e-commerce sites in general, and also learning management system sites or LMS sites. I'm talking about sites that need dynamic connections to the server. This is where people are going to need to be logged in, where each page visit at some point is going to have to hit the server and do an actual query on the database and build the site and come back to the user. So I call that dynamic sites. Where a user might need to log in or check out, as far as being on an e-commerce site. With an LMS, the users need to log in, and you might be talking about concurrent users. LMS users need to track their progress, etc. And so those are dynamic types of websites. And so as opposed to basic websites, really what you want to do with dynamic websites is to put maybe 1 to 5 maximum websites on a 2 gig or a 4 gig server. Instead of 20 to 40 sites, you'd want to put only 1 to 5 WooCommerce or LMS sites onto a server. But, it's just an $18 server. And I generally, for that type of a service, for hosting, I'll put a single Woo site or LMS site on an $18 server. But if I get a few clients at that level, I'm charging $100 to $300 a month for website care and maintenance of a dynamic website, one that might have a community or a learning management system or an e-commerce system. And the problem is, concurrent users. Current users coming to the website, those users, when they're logged in, they are actively taxing the website server when they're logged in, right? To have the checkout, remember that person's order, be able to send out the receipt emails and things like that. And when you log in, to be able to look up on the server, well, for this particular person, what is their order history? Where's, what downloads are they allowed to download? Those are direct and real-time interactions with the server. Now, when you look at basic websites that do not need users to be logged in, like brochure website, and most websites do not need high interactivity. You can even have contact forms, things like that on a basic brochure website, and that website can be cached. That is the main difference between a dynamic website and what you might call static or basic website. Most of the WordPress website on a brochure site, that's not interactive or dynamic, most of that website can be cached, meaning that person who browses to that website, they don't need to actually hit and use resources on the server. They're actually hitting a cached page, like a saved version of the page, which it speeds up your website. It makes the loading super fast for the user. And so the user experience is best on a cached website. But those pages that the WooCommerce or the e-commerce site has, like the checkout and the accounts page where you're logged in, can't be cached. They have to get private information for each user, right? And so then if you have an LMS or a learning management system or a membership, there might be more than one person logged in at the same time, right? And so those are called concurrent users. And each one of those users, if they're logged in for one, and if they need to get information from the server too, those concurrent users, going to the server in real time are not using a cached version of the page. They are using many more resources. And so if you had a popular e-commerce site, you would want to place just one e-commerce site on that, 2 gigabytes of RAM server instead of stacking 20 to 40 basic sites onto that private server. I would recommend that you have one or maybe 1 to 2, less than 5, e-commerce sites on a server of that size. That's where that's where I really wanted to wrap up today for the most part. We've talked about hosting, and on Tuesday and on Thursday, instead of going into it right now, because I'm planning on about an hour for these presentations, on Tuesday, we're going to talk about design systems. I know that a lot of you guys replied, and I appreciate your input. I've really kind of customized this week's classes to what most of the people wanted and what they voted for. If you guys have anything else that you'd like to learn, something that popped into your head as I was talking here, use the comments form below. There's open comments. Your email isn't published. Obviously, you don't even have to put your name or anything there. But if you have any questions or something that you'd like me to cover in the next 2 classes, please use the comments form there. Especially if you have any questions, I'm going to get in there and reply to the comments. But today we've covered kind of why you would use these certain types of hosting in different scenarios, right? Let me just sum up. If you're starting out, start with shared hosting. There's no reason not to, But when you do, set up your email systems so that you're using a more robust transactional email system or an SMTP email system, and then host your clients' emails or your own emails at your domain name at a service. Pay a little bit to get that. Actually, there is a free service that I'd recommend. If you're looking for free business email, Zoho.com is a great CRM company. They have email hosting. They have a number of different contact management services and things. But Zoho is a real great free service for domain email if you're just starting out. If you're looking to grow, if you have a couple of clients, I would highly recommend going to either managed WordPress hosting like Flywheel or to a self-managed, more powerful and less expensive host as you grow, like GridPane. And I highly recommend GridPane. I'll give you links to all these. Give me comments down below if there's anything more that you'd like to know about these topics. But on Tuesday, I'm just looking over and reading my notes here. What we're going to go over are creating designs quickly with 3 different design platforms on WordPress. You probably are aware that WordPress is getting more and more robust as far as its design systems based on the Gutenberg block editor. Right? Gutenberg was the code name for the new block editor that comes within WordPress, and it's changing the themes landscape really for the better. It's giving more power in the hands of the WordPress user and the designers like you and me to be able to use any theme that's more of a framework, and then the actual content blocks are something that we can design by hand inside of each page. So WordPress is kind of installing its own page builder into its systems. So the 3 design systems that we're going to learn why and how to use in the next lesson on Tuesday are going to be 1, the block editor, using either a free or a paid version of the Cadence theme. There's a few recommended themes and block plugins that are really going to be the future of WordPress over the next couple of years. The name of Tuesday's class is really future-proofing your design systems in WordPress, because using the fastest and most modern systems that work in WordPress now means that they're going to be working and very fast in the future. So for 1, the block editor using the Cadence theme, Cadence blocks, and number 2, potentially using a page builder program like Divi by Elegant Themes. That's the one I use for most of my client work these days, because it gives me a very, very powerful design system. on top of WordPress. It's like layering Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator on top of WordPress. You can design visually. You can get a lot of features like scroll animations, rollover effects with your mouse, those types of things, as well as, with all three of these, there's pre-made layouts that you can start from too that really help you learn these design systems. And the third one is another page builder system more aimed at the engineer or the coder or the experienced developer. A little bit harder to learn to use maybe, but very, very powerful, very fast loading. It's called Oxygen. And that's only a paid service, as well as so is Divi. Divi is a paid theme. They're both quite inexpensive. They have lifetime access for just a couple $100. Well worth the price. And if you've heard page builders slow down your website, and they're getting better. Divi just had a release a couple of months ago where they really became the fastest page builder, just as fast as Gutenberg, and Oxygen is known as a super fast page builder for sites loading on the front end. There's other page builders out there kind of in the vein similar to Divi that you guys may have used or heard of. Beaver Builder is one of them. Elementor has a free version. Those are now falling behind as far as speed and performance on the front end, but I do expect them to keep improving their systems so that the code that needs to be loaded on the front end for the user is modular, so it doesn't load anything unnecessarily. For now, Divi is the fastest page builder on the market. It's what I recommend and what I've been using for website clients for the last couple of years now, and it's really excellent. But next week, we're going to talk about all three of those, what type of projects would be are appropriate for each one of those, and when you would and maybe wouldn't use one of those three design systems on top of WordPress. And then I'll also touch on in the subsequent video Thursday, how to set up customer hosting. And then we're going to go into detail about e-commerce using WooCommerce and setting up customized checkout experiences, landing pages using the design systems, and sales funnels, as well as automations like abandoned cart systems. There's a couple of things that we can do with these systems that really fit within the modern world of e-commerce. If somebody, something like more than 50% of shopping cart experiences end up where the person abandons their cart without completing the checkout. And I'm going to show you systems where while the person is getting their item into the cart, the system captures their email, so you can automate abandoned cart emails. Divi also has a new conditionals system where you can have it can sense an abandoned cart system, and it can do a pop-up, give them a private coupon temporarily available if they do go back into their cart. You could say, hey, we see that you closed the cart, you had your item in there, how about 20% off, to encourage people to get back in there. So those are some of the things as far as e-commerce and working with really deeply integrated systems within WordPress, not only for your own business, but these are systems that you can sell and maintain for clients. And I'm talking about, e-commerce sites should command between $5,000 and $10,000 for the site design and install itself, and those should be hosted at $100 to $300 a month or more for website care and maintenance. And so you could see it would only take a few, even one of those clients, to first of all completely pay for your expenses as a business as far as hosting and everything, because as we know, WordPress.org is open source. It's free, right? Some of the tools that we use do cost money, but for instance, the Divi lifetime license gives you unlimited number of websites and licenses that you can use for client sites for one single price or a really low yearly price. Oxygen is a one-time lifetime. Cadence has a free version. And so it only takes a few clients, is my point, to go ahead and get into the positive as far as monthly recurring income, and then designs and projects that you can accomplish for thousands of dollars at a time. So I really appreciate you guys being here for this class. Please leave me any comments that you'd like down below. I'd love to hear from you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday. And we'll see you next time. Oh, there is going to be a replay, so look for that in your email. And we'll see you on Tuesday. Thanks, guys.